Shall we?
So,
Yeah, but who's going to do the...
I can start.
You want to do the intro?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, we're Format Wars, and we're going to break down our track Optiviewer. Steve, let's start with you. So you named this track and basically kicked it off. What's an Optiviewer, and why did you name the track after it?
So an Optiviewer is also known as a dream viewer, and it's an older device. It was a toy for kids, basically, where you would insert a tiny piece of, I guess it's like film, into the device, and you could flick through different images. And
why that?
So, around the time that I wrote the first riff for the song, I was just in Brunswick, and I walked past a toy shop, and they had the Optiviewers in the window, and it just brought back a lot of fond memories and that sort of sense of nostalgia. So,
okay, and this started all with your bass part, which was written on bass, or not?
Yeah, that's right. The original riff was actually on the bass guitar. I had started experimenting with using a capo on the bass, which is not sort of the standard thing to do. Yeah, so I came up with this riff, but the very first time I showed it to you, I'd actually transposed it to piano.
Right.
Yeah, that's the very first recording of it.
Because so much of the drums is already there on that as well. Like, it's pretty much the first thing that I thought of.
Okay.
And
which is often the case for you.
Like, pretty much. It's like a vibe.
Your first idea is
usually the one I go with.
Yeah, instincts are often good on that.
Yeah.
But I've always thought of it as being in 5/4, and so that's been fairly consistent, and that those original chords, those 4 chords, are still in the final version.
this is 3 years ago, so this has taken a few years to finish.
That's right. So this goes back to the first lockdown that we had in Melbourne. So this was written around about midway through 2020. So all of us were spending a lot of time just locked, cooped up inside. But it meant that we could sort of develop a lot of these ideas. So
very different way of making music, sending text messages to each other with snippets of audio.
Yeah, but it basically completely took away that any sense of improvising like that we had done back in the early years as a band. That completely disappeared, and we had to come up with a brand new way of doing things. So anyway, but it seemed to work out okay. Yeah, so this is the original riff now played back on the bass, but that was my old jazz bass.
With very bright sounding strings. And then we had this second section. Because the track is now that sort of initial bit, then there's a second bit that like none of this ever repeats. It goes through sort of 4 changes?
4 sections.
4 sections, 3 changes, and none of them ever repeat, which is also a pretty weird but standard way for us to arrange a track.
But yeah, the thing is that I was never happy with the piano. I thought it sounded a bit too earnest, and I didn't want it to be like a classical song. I wanted it to be a bit more, I guess, mysterious. So that was kind of something that I was determined to fix. And in later versions, ended up having this idea of, I'd been listening to some Jimi Hendrix and sort of marveling at the way he would have the hard panning left and right, and it was really extreme in those days, almost too much so.
Yeah, the Doors used to do that too. Like,
Doors,
it's like the very early days of stereo. Everyone's like, cool stereo.
Yeah, and then you'd have 100%. You just have the guitar in one, and then
And the drums in the other at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
the Beatles did the same as well.
So, but there was something kind of retro about that I liked, and then you get this great kind of separation if you do that, within reason. So I had this idea of having different, breaking up those riffs there into separate riffs on different instruments with different timing. So just to sort of keep the song interesting. This is the first recording of playing with this idea of the different riffs panned, and the first version everything was on guitar, I think. So I ended up bringing in the piano just for one, it really is just for that one little riff. One of them has guitar, and then for the other two, the riff is actually played on the bass guitar, but we pitched it up an octave.
Oh, this is our harp bass.
Yeah, so this is what I was calling the harp bass, which is basically just recorded high up on the neck, and then I played it half as slow, and then sped it up and
pitched it up a whole octave.
Yeah, and bumped it up a whole octave.
Which
I
ups
really
the
loved
speed.
that change. That was when I think you'd really found the tone for the track. Yeah.
I think I was really wanting to keep that little middle section interesting, and I wanted to have a few little surprises in there. So I think that kind of led me to record the bass that way.
Yeah, right. Let's have a listen to that. Love to see you play that live.
We'd need a second bass player with maybe like some crazy 8-string bass guitar or something.
You need to invent a new instrument, or put guitar, like bass strings on a actual guitar or something. I have no idea how you do that if you were to play it live.
Let's cross that bridge when we get to it.
I think the outro that we wrote was written pretty early on, and then we just arranged it as 4 sections, one after the other.
For a long time as well, the outro worked well, and it was just sitting there. It was like a reward, but we still had to finish the front end of the track.
That's right. Well, let's talk about Matt stuff. So,
yeah, I could talk about where I started with the idea. I want to maintain this sort of nostalgic feel that we'd set up with the title of the track and some of the instrument choices. So initially I was thinking about how do I get like a toy sounding synth. Sounds like something you could, like a Casio or something. But without going too extreme, there's probably a threshold of like I didn't want it to sound too nasty or too want to actually enjoy the track, so I didn't want to be, but still toy-ish kind of sound. So got that with the Moog synthesizer, and essentially just playing around with layers in the beginning.
I think one of the other parts I like about this is how much the synth varies. So you've got this sort of toy-ish sort of sounding beginning, and then it goes super dark with Angelo Badalamenti, like Twin Peaks strings.
I just don't. I feel like I don't have the attention span to just use the same synth through the whole track.
Yeah.
Because a new section is a new, it's done at a different time, a different take, a different session. I'm in a different mood. So yeah, then we're into kind of almost like more of an 80s style synth pad.
I also remember there was a moment when Matt wanted to change that. He introduced some changes to that synth part, and I remember you and I just shutting it down because we thought he'd nailed it the first time.
Yeah.
So fighting to keep the original.
Maybe let's talk about the outro then, because you wrote this on the Peak, I'm guessing, because of the name, the Novation rather than the Moog.
Yeah.
But this sounds like a brass band or something to me.
Yeah.
Something I was really hyped about is that I was getting a sound out of the synth that sounded like a brass orchestra because it was distorting, and just because of the settings, it was, and it was layered. So this particular synth can only play 2 notes at a time. So I would go over it and over and over it again to kind of create this feel of a little brass ensemble. And each take would have slightly different settings on the synth, so they'd all sound a bit different.
Just like human players.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then almost to kind of create the illusion of, if you didn't know any better, you'd think we had a brass band in the background there. And we had that in pretty early, but so it was almost like, how do we get the rest of the track to arrive at that? Yeah.
That's right. I still remember the first time that you showed us that, and it was so good, and then we just kept it for the outro, and then we never talked about changing it, and it was always about fixing up. Like, I was determined to fix up the intro in that middle section
to get to the reward at the end.
So
And then for the fade out, it's really just the drums that fade out. Because I don't like fade outs and you love them.
I love fade outs.
Yeah.
Why? Because the track goes on forever. Because montages fade out.
Yeah, I do like that idea that a fade out, it's like the song goes on forever and you've walked away from the song. You know what I mean? The song hasn't moved away from you, it's that you've moved away from it.
Right.
But it's always there.
And it kind of disintegrates a little bit with the brass bits are actually out of time and the edits are all pretty loose, and
yeah.
In the end that kind of sounded good. It sort of, disintegrating at the end.
And I mean, overall, it's probably one of the more, not simplistic, accessible tracks that we've written, because it's pretty much like a straight rock track, just with some strange phrasing and timing, but it sort of feels like a 4/4 track, even if it's not.
Yeah. So so I wanted to ask you about that. Is that because of the way that you've structured the drums, where an average punter would be tapping there? Because to me, it's the kind of song as soon as you hear the drums, like, it's very easy to tap your foot. And of course, the problem with a lot of this, some prog rock stuff and like math rock, is that it's very sophisticated, but it's very difficult to follow, or very difficult to have a sense of a groove. Or so was that sort of part of your, like, when I said, oh, here's a riff, it's in 5/4, and it goes like this, did you deliberately want to sort of make it more
I don't know.
accessible? Or
I think we're always trying to find the groove in what we create, and that one seemed to work almost like. I guess probably the inspo for that would be listening to a lot of John Bonham and Led Zeppelin drums in general. Songs like Black Dog, where they play, I don't even know the time signature, I can't remember, some geek figured it out. But it's basically, or Kashmir, where he's playing a straight 4/4 beat over groups of 5 or 6 to just keep a kind of a groove going. It just seemed to work for this, and I think part of it was your inputs, like the bass part being sort of semi-structured that way, especially in the heart bass. So when you listen to the heart bass bit, that last little bit of the bar is when it goes to 2 groups of 5, and that's the only part of the track that doesn't roll. So if you listen to the drums, it's sort of 4/4/2 to make up 10 beats, 4/4 and 2 to make up 10 beats, and then 2 groups of 5. I don't know why it's written that way, but it at least minimizes the 5/4-ness of the track to 2 tiny little bits in the song. And it seems to work with the bass, whereas the rest of it feels nice to just kind of let it roll.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, who wants to take us out? Me?
Yeah, or Matt had the idea, so...
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the track and some of the details that we've talked about. Hopefully that you can hear those when you listen to Optiviewer, which we'll link in the description.